Since I was a child, there have been moments I felt so blessed that I wanted to hug God for the gifts He gave me. It could be a toy, a game, or a cartoon DVD. Even today, as an adult, there are moments I feel so grateful I literally do a fist bump with a big hand from the sky which represents God. In my mind, of course. And it feels so cool, bro. Imagine yourself shaking hands with the creator of the whole universe. It just has so much aura, it makes you feel like the time Ali lifted the door of Khaybar. But of course, this is all in your mind and not real. Is it possible for us humans to shake hands with God? And by that I mean a traditional physical handshake, not any spiritual or intellectual one. For this to be possible, it requires both sides to have a physical body. We know humans have one. But can we say that about God? In simple words, if we want to see if we can shake hands with God or not, we need to answer the following. Does God have a physical body? And that's what we're going to discuss in today's video. It's going to be super fun, so make sure you stick with me until the end. Before we start, we need to set some assumptions about God. God is perfect and has no defect. God does not need anything. Nothing like God exists. God knows everything and does nothing without a reason. God is almighty and can do anything. If God is the creator of life and this big universe, then He must have the aforementioned characteristics. And if He doesn't, it undermines His ability as the creator. Now let's assume God has a body. Okay, now imagine God with His body. I trust your creativity on that. Now imagine the same body besides it. If a body exists, it is possible that another body with the same attributes exists. It was a possibility for you to have an identical twin at birth. Or in a possible future, you can make a clone of your body with your genetic data. A simpler example is the Bugatti La Voiture Noire. It is indeed a one-off car. But does that mean you can make another one? You definitely can. I mean, Bugatti has all the plans and knows the design process. Even an old man in Iran is making a replica of it. So any existing body, organic or not, can have an identical twin. And this contradicts our third assumption in which we stated nothing like God exists. Now imagine that body again. Now imagine another body but 2 times bigger than the God's body. If these two play a simple game of tug of war, the bigger body is going to win, and God loses. In simple words, God can't defeat someone bigger than Himself. And this contradicts our fifth assumption in which we stated God is almighty and can do anything. Hold on a moment. How did the creator of the universe lose? Simple. The problem was that He had a body. And a body is limited in size and power. While God is not limited, His power and size are infinite. With these simple arguments, we already figured out that God does not have a physical body, but wait, there is more. A body can't exist unless it has a space to be placed on. Much like how a car needs roads and parking lots. If God had a body, He would need a place to exist. But as we said before, God does not need anything. While having a body clearly suggests that God needs a place just to exist. God doesn't need anything to exist. Everything needs God to exist. Having a physical body means you are limited to space. And you can move as far as the space goes. We know that God is the creator of all things, even space. A creator can't be limited to something He created. That just doesn't make sense. For the sake of the argument, let's once again assume that God has a body. As long as you don't imagine Him as a solid rock, His body must have parts like hands, feet, and eyes. Why? Why does He have these body parts? Does He need them to do things? Does He need a hand to pick things up? Or feet to walk? Or eyes to see? Does that mean if you take these parts from Him, He won't be able to do things? If you take His eyes, will He go blind? In other words, this argument is saying that God needs His body parts. While we clearly stated God is perfect and has no defect, and God does not need anything. And this simply proves the argument wrong. Someone might say, oh, God does have body parts, but He doesn't need them, you know. He has hands, but He can pick anything He wants without them. Then tell me, why does He have hands? If He doesn't need them, why does He have them? Don't tell me He has hands for the sake of decoration. As I said before, God knows everything and does nothing without a reason. Everything He creates has a purpose. And you're telling me He created hands and other body parts for Himself without a reason? Debunked, bro, debunked. God having body parts raises one more question. Which one was first? God or God's hands? We know that parts precede the whole. If you want to make a car, you first need to make its parts. So does that mean before God was God's hand? And then the parts came together and made God? One of our simplest understandings of God is the fact that He is eternal. He always existed and will always exist. Nothing created Him and nothing destroys Him. I think that's enough for body parts. Another problem of God having a body is the fact that you can divide that body. As we all know, God doesn't die. He is immortal. And if you divide God into, say, two parts, then you will have two half a God, which even by definition is impossible. The basic assumptions we used were actually derived from various verses of the Quran. And as we said before, Quran is the word of God, so our logical arguments are actually backed by God Himself. But sometimes the Quran can be confusing. The apparent meaning of some verses of the Quran suggests that God has a body. A famous example is a part of this verse: Allah's hand is over their hands. The part about Allah's hand caused some of the Muslims to think that God has a hand, because that's what this verse is suggesting. But their interpretation is superficial and not true. In reality, hand above hands is a metaphor for the power of God being superior to all powers. There are more verses similar to this one. These verses that are kinda vague and can have multiple meanings are called mutashabih verses. And we didn't make this up. This is what God tells us in the Quran. The subject deserves a dedicated video, so stay tuned. The general themes of the verses regarding the physicality of God are divided into three categories: the speaking of God, the face of God, and the coming of God. In this case, coming implies movement. Let's explain them one by one very fast. God does speak, but not through any physical mechanism like mouth or throat. The essence of divine speech is the unveiling of God's intended meaning, and that is achieved without material tools. Thus, while speech retains its true purpose, which is communication, its manifestation transcends human limitations, making it literal yet beyond physical constraints. In other words, He speaks but has no voice, yet you still hear and understand Him. Face for humans denotes a physical countenance, but for God, it signifies His perfect attributes such as mercy, knowledge, and power, the means by which the creation turns to Him. Face is the manifestation of His sacred qualities to creation, not a literal or metaphorical bodily feature. Human coming involves spatial movement, but God's coming, like His coming on the Judgment Day, means removing barriers between Him and His creation to enact His decree. Stripped of material connotations such as location and motion, this concept applies literally to God as the sudden manifestation of His power and wisdom, not physical arrival. Terms like speech, face, and coming are used in their true meaning for God, but their manifestation is uniquely divine, free from material limits. Don't feel bad if you feel confused. This is confusing stuff. After all, we're walking on the border of the material understanding with these topics. We were seeking God for a long time. There is something in the human nature that drives them to find the one who created them. But when they encounter something complex and beyond their understanding, they need to make it simple and drag it down so it can be understandable. This resulted in many people imagining God with a physical body, because they couldn't understand something without a body. They couldn't understand speaking without a voice or seeing without eyes. If you show this video to someone from the ancient Greek era, they wouldn't understand any of its logical arguments. Probably, while we understand it perfectly. That's a beautiful trait of humanity. We are evolving. We understand many things that our ancestors couldn't even think of. That's why it took 124,000 prophets to finally reach Islam. As Prophet Muhammad once said, "We, the group of prophets, have been commissioned to speak to people according to their understanding." That's why God used so many metaphors in the Quran, like the hand of God or God sitting on His throne. Everyone can understand things they couldn't understand through these simplified metaphors and analogies. And to understand the true meaning of the metaphors, we simply need to use our brain and get help from the Prophet, as the Quran suggested many times. As for the question we asked, God doesn't have a body, so you can't do a traditional handshake with Him. Subscribe.